But, I want to bring in someone here who is a Free Press contributor, and it made me think of Abigail Shrier, and I want to plug her book, Bad Therapy, Why the Kids Aren't Growing Up. But I thought of a 2020, this is my amazing memory, Abigail, that I thought of a 2022 Free Press article. And I remember the headline. I was like, I got to pull this up quickly. Abigail Shrier in defense of political escalation. We just saw a speech, Abigail Shrier, that was absolutely the opposite of that. That was the king of escalation, Tucker Carlson, bringing it all back. What did you make of the speech?
Well, it's great to be here. It's great to talk to both of you. I think, escalation has its place. I don't think it was a very good speech. Yeah. I think that it tried to, but it did sort of, I think, indicate the two people that go by the term America First. There are essentially two camps, right? You have the Trump first term, which went by America First. It was about putting America's interests first, but it was not isolationist. It was about getting, European countries to pay more for NATO, but it was not. But it was the party of the Abraham Accords too. Right. Then you have the other group that goes by America First, which is a far darker messaging. It is exactly what Tucker said, and I think he represents it. Stepping over the dead bodies of Americans who've been killed by fentanyl to give money to Ukraine. He called it a middle finger in the face of every American. I think Trump has generally, at least the vibe, has been to turn away from that anger, resentment of one camp of this America First group. And honestly, I think that version of America First, the angry $1 to Ukraine is a middle finger in the face of Americans, I think that's a really bad path. And generally, I don't think this convention has been about that.
Abigail. Oh, I'm sorry, Michael. Go ahead.
Well, I'll throw this to both of you because I'm interested in Bari's response to this too. I mean, you see people, or particularly, Tucker Carlson setting the stage for Donald Trump. And we've heard from a lot of leaks and Republican operatives that you're going to see a different Trump, a changed Trump. Do either of you suspect that JD Vance, and I know that through the reporting that Doug Burgum was in the mix and it was kind of a late choice, surprised some people, is JD Vance going to fulfill that dark role, the dark Brandon, the American carnage role? And Donald Trump, last night, you have his absolutely adorable 17-year-old granddaughter saying he's just like a really sweet granddad. Are we seeing sweet granddad? And JD Vance, who's the future of the Republican Party, is going to take that darker American carnage route.
Right. I don't know what he's going to do. I think that JD Vance's rhetoric has sometimes been dark, but JD Vance has other attributes that I think are really promising for the Republican Party. He's the non-judgmental candidate. He's the guy who came from, the holler of Appalachia, and is very open about his family's history of addiction. I mean, remember back to the Biden debate with Trump that went so badly for Trump back in 2020, when Trump, I think Trump's worst moment was when he attacked Joe Biden for having a son who was an addict. And Joe Biden's best moment was when he came back and he said, a lot of us have family members struggling with addiction. That's right. Yeah. American families have been through the ringer in the last decade. And to pretend that American families all look like Mitt Romney and Mike Pence, and that we should somehow look down on them if they don't, that's really not who Americans are today. And it seems like the choice of JD Vance is putting that in the past.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting because, I mean, this started before, he was shot. I mean, it's absolutely, by the way, to just stop and say it is insane to say that the former president was shot like 5 days ago. It's nuts to me that I'm just saying this.
It's nuts. And yet, it's almost a distant memory, given the fact that we're hearing that this weekend Joe Biden's going to drop out of the election. I've never been in a news cycle like this in my entire life. I was speaking to one of our colleagues, Emily Yaffe, today, who Abigail knows well. And she was like, Bari, I'm old. I was alive when JFK was shot. This is crazier.
Yeah.
It just feels absolutely insane.
I think it is crazier. And I think that the moment when I realized that is I was in a room full of people, very mixed crowd, left, right, center, watching the debate. I was going to say the first debate. That's going to be the debate. And the air that came out of the room, and I realized at that point, I had never seen a political moment like that where everyone was like baffled, confused, and it went on for like an hour. But in that moment, Donald Trump, as you said, Abigail, did not take the opportunity to, as he did before, say, your son's an addict. How did you? I expected him to say, look at this doddering old fool. He doesn't even know where he is, that kind of thing. He didn't take it.
And he didn't inflame the country over it. And he didn't promote conspiracy theory. I think that's a very ugly part, frankly, of, the right, is that the festering conspiracy theory. And just because you've been lied to about COVID, or lied to about masking policies, or lied to by kids' schools, when they gave your daughter a boy's name and have been transing her behind your back, just because you've been lied to doesn't mean every conspiracy theory is correct.
Yeah.
And in general, the conspiracy theory festering all over our politics has been a really, really negative thing. I'm glad that Trump did not focus on that when there was an assassination attempt and what looks like a disaster by the Secret Service.
Yeah.
But speaking of conspiracy theories, I think one of the sort of which way is the GOP going to go, isolationist or not, protectionist or not, one of those sort of forks in the road to me is about conspiracy theories. There were people who spoke this week at the GOP, for all of the like, God's light is shining on us, unity messaging, sort of turning down the temperature. You had people who traffic in out and out conspiracy theories taking the main stage. One of the things that I think we can draw, like one of the lessons we can draw from the story of the Democratic Party over the past 10 or even 20 years is that the people and the ideas and the ideologies and the worldviews that were dismissed as fringe, it's just campus, it's just radicals, don't worry about it. Well, no, it made its way into the very beating heart of the Democratic Party. How worried are you when you're looking at the future of the GOP about those sort of fringe conspiratorial elements? And what do you take away from their presence sort of in certain parts at center stage at the RNC?
I of course I worry about conspiracy theory in general. It's very unhealthy. And I think when you say things like, look, there's plenty of reasons to be skeptical about our Ukraine policy. But when you tell Americans that is giving you the middle finger, that's the middle finger to Americans, that's some, really heated rhetoric designed to make people very angry. I mean, really transparently. And I think that's really unhelpful. In other words, it's not a middle finger. You might disagree on policy, but that's a debate we can have. Now, the problem is you've got on the Democratic side, frankly, there's so much abnormality in the politics and policies. You have, DAs that don't want to put people in jail. You have school policies. I just wrote about this for their Free Press, where the policy for the last 5 years, as I've been reporting on it, of schools, public schools across the country, is to introduce gender identity to children, a new gender identity, encourage them, celebrate them in a new gender identity, give them a new name. You can call kids, a boy's name for a year, and you actively deceive parents. That 2 days ago, that became law in California, that the schools cannot change the policy and cannot notify parents. They can't adopt a policy to notify parents. That is bananas. It's bananas. And that was signed into law by Gavin Newsom, a mainstream member of the Democratic Party.
The headline on the piece, for those who want to go look it up, and maybe we can share it inside the chat somehow. I'm technologically illiterate, but our producers will figure it out. The headline is Abigail Shrier, California's new law lets schools keep secrets from parents. Now, this is the law, if you guys have noticed Elon Musk tweeting over the past few days, that he says for him is the last straw. It's the reason SpaceX and X are going to leave California. He called it a diabolical law meant to sort of insert the state between parents and children. And I guess, Abigail, one of the things that we've been talking a lot about at the Free Press, and I think is in the conversation more generally, is, let's call it the vibe shift that's happened over the past several weeks, but like absolute cyber speed over the past 5 days, in which you've sort of seen this preference cascade. It started with Sean McGuire, former exec at Google, someone who is, sort of in the Elon Musk brat pack of Silicon Valley. Now you have Mark Andreessen, Ben Horowitz, Elon Musk, of course, like after the attempted assassination, all of these people sort of coming out full-throatedly. And, every time I turn around, another person is putting on a white bandage, the equivalent of a white bandage, of what they're doing on Twitter. Like, how do you explain this? Is this something that, people were too scared to say out loud and the taboo all of a sudden disappeared when they saw Donald Trump raise his fist and say, fight, fight, fight? Or are they having a genuine change of mind? Like, I'm really fascinated in this phenomenon, and I wonder what you make of it.
I think Donald Trump did two very important things. He removed the definition of traditional marriage from the RNC platform, and he eliminated the federal ban on abortion. That's not where most Americans are. It was tactically really smart because it allowed Silicon Valley now to donate to him. But I also think it's strategically smart as well because it allows the RNC to claim working class voters. So it really was a very smart move. I think it's a move in keeping with where the country is. And I think we're seeing the results of that, where a lot of people are now finally, feeling like they've been very unhappy with the hard left in the Democratic Party. They feel like they're more in line with the Republican Party. And now they're embracing it. I know when I interview moms, they tell me, and these are longstanding Democrats whose kids have been, many of them have been put through a gender transition or a social transition by ideologues in the schools. And these moms have been long saying, I could never vote Republican. Now, when I talk to them, they're saying they're voting Republican.
Abigail Shrier joining us from LA. Buy her book. Everybody else seems to be buying it. Amazon, thousands of reviews for Bad Therapy. Why the kids aren't growing up. Mine isn't either. I'll give you a call, Abigail, and you can tell me why she's not growing up. But she ain't. And we appreciate you stopping by. Read her at the Free Press, too. She is a frequent contributor. Thank you very much, Abigail.
Thank you.